People who got or helped to get someone in prison. What's your story? Talked to my dad on the phone for the first time in 6 years to lure him to the spot where the arrest took place. I was 17 years old at the time, pulled out of school with zero notice I would be doing this. Sex crimes from 15 years ago and a year-long trial. Bastard was sentenced to 11 years. Would do it again in a heartbeat. Fuck that guy. My brother was back on heroin after getting out of a 6-month rehab. My mom said she would meet him to give him cash to help him out after he was kicked out of the house. She called the cops instead and got him locked up for 2 years to save his life. He's clean now, 20 years, and all of his friends overdosed and died. An older friend told me this story on a camping trip. He discovered that his brother had been molesting his own children for years. On the ride back he thought of nothing other than killing his brother. He thought of his own family, his wife and his 5 kids without a provider. He lost a night of sleep over it and then decided to kill him, but realized that doing so would punish his own kids. He called his brother's wife and she told him that it was okay, he only did it when he was drunk. She was afraid for the kids if he left. He drove to the police station and informed on his brother. They arrested him and the kids told the police everything. His brother got 17 years in prison and my friend took care of his family the entire time. When he got out his kids were grown except for one. My friend adopted her at 15 so she could finish high school. 2 weeks after he got out of prison he got into a car accident and broke his leg. They discovered he had bone cancer and was dead in less than a month. For 17 years my friend took care of 2 families and never looked back. He told me this story last year and after he smiled and said, it would have been easier to just fucking kill him. While working security in the Southwest, I found a man knotted out in his car with a candle going under the dash that was starting to char the dash above it. I would have either woke him or tried to put the candle out, but guy had a syringe in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. I called the police, and they came to deal with him. Turns out, guy was in parole for a violent offense, and there was a loaded AR-15 under the jacket in the passenger seat. Mom took me with her to the police station to report my dad. They took me to a private room and switch out investigators and tried different tactics before I finally gave in and spoke to someone. Dad was in prison for 15-ish years. My mom also did 11 years for her role in the abuse, which she obviously wasn't expecting. A friend of mine got robbed while we were both hanging out together. We were early teens and got cornered by a group of 6 or 7 of much older, bigger teens. One said to me, "Give me some money." I just bluffed it, saying I didn't have any. He went to my friend and said the same, and my friend started emptying pockets. The one lad in question grabbed his wallet and pushed us both over, then ran. The guy's friends were in shock and stayed with us. We called the police and reported it. Had to give a statement on my experience and pick a lad out of a lineup. The guy in question, it turns out, lived in a troubled boys' home and admitted it as soon as he got back. He was sentenced without us knowing what the deal was. I ended up getting a check for $12 for distress from the court. When I was a kid, Mom had an abusive boyfriend that she kept going back to. One night he threatened our lives via text, so we braced all the doors and windows in the house. Didn't expect him to climb up the side of the house and break into a second-floor window. While he's going through, trashing the house and beating the shit out of Mom, my sister and I were hidden in my room on the phone with police. When they showed up, knocked on the door, he goes, "Who the fuck is that?" I flew out of my room, unlocked the door and threw it open. It's the fucking cops. I've never seen a man's face lose color so fast. Mom didn't press charges and abandoned us for 2 weeks a month later to leave state with him. I was on jury duty that gave a guilty verdict to a gang member involved in a shooting that killed a rival gang member. I asked my step-grandfather to go to a police station to collect something for me. He fell for it and was arrested and is still in jail for sexual assault of a minor. The fucker stabbed me. In front of 2 cops. In front of a police station. What a fucking idiot. Dunno what happened to him. Heard he's free now. Bet he's gonna stab me again. What a fucking idiot. Context, he claims I stole his girl. The girl in question is my sister. What a fucking idiot. Hello, Child Protective Services. I need to report a case of child abuse. I've made this call far too many times. Not sure if he's in prison yet. Probably just in jail. But while I was working security at a retail store, there was a gentleman indecently exposing himself who refused to leave when asked. When he refused to leave the property, I called the police. Turns out the guy had multiple warrants out for his arrest when the police came to pick him up. Just did my jury duty and found someone guilty on their 3rd violent felony. Later heard 3rd-time violent felony is a mandatory life sentence. Dude was on parole when he beat an 85-year-old man so bad he spent 3 weeks in coma at the ICU. Jury took all of 1 minute to come to a unanimous decision. Of course we did give anyone time to protest or counter-argue. No one did. Guilty. I used to be a domestic violence advocate and helped get many people in prison by supporting survivors and encouraging them to participate in legal proceedings, even standing next to them in court, sitting away from their abuser so I'm in their line of sight, accompanying them to depositions, and whatever else they needed to keep moving forward. I could only handle it for 3 years before I felt burnt out, but it was the most rewarding years of my life. I once reported someone for stealing my identity. They got caught trying to use my credit card to pay their bail from a previous arrest. Got asked to investigate a manager's work computer. Silly fool had Tor browser on his desktop. He had a lot of evidence of doing very bad things, like selling employees' ID on the dark web. I picked up some friends and as we drove past a house, one said, "I burned a cross in their yard and threw a brick at the window." I just laughed it off and continued our day. I called the FBI hotline that night and told them exactly how to find them. https://archives.fbi.gov. Archivist Newspress press released woman plead guilty in Kentucky cross burning case. Back in 2000, I supported a friend whose brother was murdered by his wife. My friend knew she was lying when she told the cops her husband had suicided. He was integral in spurring the investigation and took the stand in her trial. That was one of the most powerful moments I'd ever witnessed. He stayed at my house during the trial because he lived in one city and his brother had been murdered in another where I lived. Dan Rathers and other famous journalists were calling my friend and his girlfriend for months. We knew their phones were tapped, so all of our conversations had to be guarded unless in person. But the moment that creeped me out the most was when the murderess turned around from the defendant's table and stared me right in the eyes. I was sitting next to the family of the guy murdered and she knew I was there to support them. The coldness in her eyes shook me to my core. Knowing she would never be free again was my only comfort. https://n.wikipedia.org. Wiki Kristen Rossum. One of my siblings was high on drugs. He used an axe to cut through the window. Then he pointed a gun at my head and threatened to kill me and my entire family. Once he left, I immediately called the police out of fear. He was in prison after this. PLS don't do drugs. I sent my molester to jail. It involved a sting operation with a wiretapped phone where I had to elicit his confession. That was the scariest part until having to face him in court. I was 13 when the assaults began. He was 36. It lasted 4 years. While my identity was not disclosed during the trial as I was a minor, our mutual friends knew it was my fault he was getting put away. I was victim blamed and then shunned. I wrestled for years with the guilt of having ruined his life, without considering the full impact he had on mine. He served a sentence of only 6 months. My detectives called me the day he was released. I became incredibly paranoid, thinking he would retaliate against me, so I began carrying a box cutter everywhere I went. Thankfully, nowadays the memories of those horrible nights we spent together only come up about once a year and make me melancholy for a few days. But I did want to say, for anyone hopping on this thread thinking that having someone who harmed you arrested would be a sigh of relief, it didn't feel like that at all. I had nightmares and delusions for years and still occasionally run my fingers over the scars.